All right. So, hello, everyone. I am Pastor Cooper, the pastor of Love Fellowship Worship Center, also the general manager of Our Spirit Online, and also a member of the Faith Leaders Roundtable. And I'm so grateful that I have some really, really awesome pastors and clinicians on this Zoom with me. And our purpose is really to inform our community about the COVID vaccines and also the disease, and kind of give us an update on where we are. We did this about 6 months ago when we were really in the heat of the battle, but now we have a lot more tools to work with. And I know that the public has had a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. And as far as I'm concerned, anything that concerns God's people is a concern for us. And as pastors and leaders in our community, we want to make sure that we give you good, factual, scientific information, as well as some spiritual encouragement, so that as we make decisions, as we come out of this COVID period, we're doing it with a level of knowledge and hope. And so that's what we want to do today. And so I have some awesome people on the call with me. I'm going to call their names, and then if they could just introduce themselves, would be really, really good. And we want to start out with our two very special guests, and that is Dr. Angela Blanche. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Hi, Rochester. Hi, pastors. Thank you for having me on this program. My name is Angela Blanche, and I'm an infectious disease physician. I'm also an assistant professor of medicine at the University of Rochester. And in my professional hat, I've been able to have the privilege of working on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic here locally in Rochester and as part of the U.S. response. And so I'm fortunate to be able to share some of the things that I've learned and that I've participated with, and that have helped me to understand how God is going to move us to this pandemic, to the other side of it. And I'd love to share that with you.
Well, thank you so very, very much. And we also have Reverend Phyllis Jackson.
Good evenings. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back with you, Pastor Cooper. I am Phyllis Jackson. I am the Community Wellness Project Manager at Common Ground Health, the founder of the Interdenominational Health Ministry Coalition, Associate Pastor at Joint Heirs Kingdom Ministries. I'm also on the New York State Governor's Equity Task Force Executive Committee around equitable distribution of the vaccine as we move forward through this pandemic. And I'm one of the participants in the vaccine study that's being conducted by Dr. Branch. And that's how I got to know this awesome, brilliant woman of God. So I'm glad to be able to be here with her.
Awesome. And Reverend Cox.
Thank you, Reverend Benjamin Cox. I'm an associate pastor of the Elam Christian Fellowship Church of Buffalo, also a member of the Faith Leadership Roundtable, and I'm excited about being here this evening.
Awesome. Great to have you. Also, we have Dr. Johnny Harris.
Good day. I'm Dr. Johnny Harris. I am the senior pastor of the Interlink Churches of Western New York from Rochester and Buffalo, as well as the chairman of the Bible Centers of Rochester and Syracuse. And it's an honor to be a part of this today.
And we have Pastor Sandra Felder.
Good evening. I'm Pastor Felder from the Rhema Life Community Church located in the Rochester area. Thank you for inviting me tonight.
Glad to have you. Really glad to have you. And we also have Dr. Perdita Meeks.
Good evening, everyone. I am just excited to be here tonight. Thank you, Pastor Cooper. And just want to say I am assistant to my husband at Newborn Fellowship Church, located here in Rochester, New York. And also just want to say that it is just really important for us to do what we're doing, but we empower lives every day. And so that's what we're doing here tonight.
Amen. And we also have Pastor Cynthia Anderson. Oh, you're on mute.
Blessings to everyone. It's good to see you all. I am Pastor Anderson of Greater Faith Hope Center. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know what all I'm supposed to say, but I'm just glad to be in the number one more time.
Well, the good news is everybody who's anybody knows who Pastor Cynthia Anderson is. So we're grateful to have you. So I want to share with you a quick slide. Let me see if I can share my screen. This is the latest information from Monroe County, and it shows that we see a fairly steep climb last summer, right around this time, leading out of May going into April. We were in the heat of the battle, and we didn't know a whole lot about what was going on. A lot of people were really fearful. We were having a lot of deaths, hospitals, infections, and it seemed to have tapered off a little bit as we got into the fall, but then it spiked again at the end of the year. And it seems as though now the infection numbers are starting to come down. We're starting to see and all the other stuff that goes along with that, we're starting to see that decline as well. So we're really, really grateful for that. But we know more now, and we should be better at managing these kinds of things. I was telling some folks earlier today, I mean, it seems like after all that we've been through over the last 12 months, we're just about prepared for anything. And so we're grateful that the things are starting to get better, but we do have some tools that are available to us now that we didn't have before. And that's why I wanted to do this call. So I want to start out with Dr. Angela Blanche, just to help us understand. I guess my first question, and then I want to open it up to the panel, is, what's the difference between some of these vaccines? We've got Moderna, Johnson & Johnson just came out, and we have Pfizer. So if you can help us understand that.
Sure. If it's okay with you, I'd like to do a little science teaching, just because I think everyone should understand a little bit about how these vaccines are made, how vaccines work in general, so that they can make the best decisions for themselves. Knowledge really makes a difference. I'd also like to start by saying also that, I'm a physician and a scientist, but I'm first and foremost a child of God. And a faithful follower of Jesus Christ. And I don't find those two things at all contradictory. I think they work really well. I think science and medicine shows me the glory of God and helps me to partner with what his wonderful redemptive power and promise for our lives. And so I love to have faith conversations about science and medicine, because I think that as Christians, we can lead the way in helping people to have healthy lives and to be who God intended them to be.
Yes.
So, vaccines, I think one common misconception of vaccines is that we're going to be injecting you with something that is then going to protect you from whatever disease we're protecting you from. And that's not actually the truth. And Reverend Jackson is the one who actually taught me that that's something that I need to teach people, that I need to tell them that a vaccine is actually a training exercise for your body. So what happens when you encounter an infection naturally is that God has given you a defense system called your immune system. And when you first encounter an infection, any infection, and it's the first time you're seeing it, after you've seen that infection, the infection actually trains your body's defense to be able to defend you if you were to become exposed to that infection in the future. And so your immune system is so smart and it's so beautifully designed by God that it remembers the thing that you've been exposed to in the past. And so that if you were to see that thing again, you can rapidly mobilize a defense that's able to prevent you from getting sick again. So how does a vaccine work? What a vaccine does is that it takes advantage of the thing that God designed, this memory, this learning that your immune and defense system does. And it says, well, what if I gave you something that trained that defense to occur? And so that it's ready now to be able to defend you. And so that's really what vaccines do. It's not the vaccine that's protecting you, it's the vaccine that's giving you something that triggers that training exercise of your body's immune system that sets off this natural thing that God created. And now, once it's trained, it can do the job it was designed to do. And so what do we do when we give you a vaccine? Well, the virus called the coronavirus, the SARS coronavirus 2, which causes COVID-19, the reason why it's so dangerous to us is because it's a virus no human has ever seen before the pandemic started. And so because we've never seen it, we've never been trained to defend ourselves against it. And so it has the opportunity to make us really sick and to even lead to us dying from COVID-19. And so there's a part of the virus that sticks out of the surface of the virus called the spike protein. And it's just a protein, it's completely harmless, but it's actually the part of the virus that connects to your body's cells. So when you inhale it, because somebody coughs it in the air, the spike protein sticking out of the surface of the virus is the part that attaches to cells that line your nose all the way down to your lungs. And so the idea behind these vaccines is, what if we could train the body to develop a defense in the form of antibodies, which would block that protein from attaching? And so how did we do that? Well, it's pretty simple. All of these vaccines do the same thing. They deliver something to you that allows your body to make that protein naturally. And once you start to make that protein naturally, even though it's protein and it can't hurt you, your body recognizes it as something that's foreign, that shouldn't be there, and you start to develop antibodies and other defense mechanisms against that protein. So that if you actually get exposed to the real coronavirus, these antibodies can now rapidly mobilize because they're already there, and it can defend you. It can block the coronavirus from doing that necessary attachment step. If the virus never attaches, it never infects, and without infection, you don't get disease. So really, we're delivering to you in these different vaccines something that's going to teach your body to make the spike protein naturally. Now, 2 of the vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, are delivering instructions from the spike protein gene, not the gene itself, but instructions that teach your body to make spike protein. So the way to think about this, and I know people have heard about mRNA a lot. mRNA is like, so if you can imagine like you're building a house and your body's cells is the contractor of the house, right? That's going to do the actual building. And God is the architect, and he creates a blueprint, and the blueprint is the DNA. But the contractor is not an architect. So the contractor cannot interpret the blueprint and build a house on its own. The contractor needs a conversation from the architect about what the blueprint says. And that's what messenger RNA or mRNA is. It's not the blueprint, it's not the gene, it's the conversation. And so what those 2 vaccines do is that it gives you that conversation, those instructions, and then your body starts to churn out spike protein, which again is not harmful to you, and then you develop an immune response to the spike protein that becomes memory. Now, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and another one called AstraZeneca that'll be coming out shortly works in a similar way, except where we use a virus to deliver the instructions for the spike protein. And it's a way of making vaccine that we've been doing for decades. So it's very, so we know how it works. And the virus that's the delivery system isn't itself going to infect you. It's sort of a Trojan horse. And once it delivers the instructions for the spike protein, it sort of gets swept away and it's no longer a problem. And then the third way that vaccines are going to be made, and these are vaccines that'll come out in a few months, Novavax and Sanofi, is just to make pure spike protein in the lab and inject that as a vaccine. So you see, it's all a theme. Same exact target. It's all about the spike protein. It's all about how do you prevent the virus from attaching? How do you train the body to prevent that unnecessary attachment step, and that becomes memory that can defend you in the future. So that's how the vaccines are a little bit different. In fact, the science behind them is the same, but the delivery is slightly different. And so they're going to work in slightly different ways, but all intended to train your body's immune system.
Wow.
Very
Hey,
interesting.
go ahead, Pastor Harris.
I tell you, first and foremost, Dr. Branch, thank you so much for the amount of information that you really just provided. I know that I personally am going to have to go back and take in really everything that you have stated. That's so very important. I did want to ask a question, and it's basically in the lines of, and I know a couple of us, unfortunately, were contracted with coronavirus. So how does the vaccine, in terms of taking it or not, help us that, again, have already tested positive?
Right. So that's a great question, Pastor Harris. So once you've had a natural infection, your immune system gets trained from that natural infection. And so you do have this immune response that now is memory, but it does wane over time. And we expect that after a few months, while you still have some partial defense, the defense may not be sufficient to prevent you from getting reinfected again. We also know that there are new strains of the virus as the virus mutates, which viruses naturally do. As the virus mutates, new strains are emerging, which will evade, to some extent, that natural defense you now have. And so a vaccine will still be helpful to you because it'll do two things. It'll boost what you've already naturally acquired. And it will also help to give you some additional defense against new strains that might emerge. And so we do recommend that people who have gotten a natural infection still get vaccinated so that you have that boosted response, which will prevent a reinfection.
Yeah. I want to go to Reverend Jackson, and then we'll just open it up for all of your questions. Reverend Jackson, if you can just give us an update on where we are with availability for the vaccine. You're on mute.
Well, we're getting better. We do not have enough vaccine available to vaccinate everyone that wants to be vaccinated or needs to be vaccinated. But we are making progress with the advent of the authorization for the Johnson & Johnson. We will have more vaccine. At this point, we've had a little over 200,000 doses of vaccine to our area. That is Monroe County, as well as the outlying counties in the area. At this point today, in our update, we found out that we're still lower than percentage of what we want, but we expect that by May, June, with the advent of Johnson & Johnson, we're going to be, hopefully by the fall, 80% of the people can be vaccinated. We have opened up some new sites because we have increased numbers of vaccinations. So now there has been a site that has opened up, Hawkeye, over on St. Paul. And that is going to be a site that's done by FEMA and the government and the state. And we have 28 days over there to vaccinate 1,000 people a day. And it was intentionally opened up for the first week for people in certain zip codes that were all city zip codes, because we had a low uptake of people taking it there. And so we, at this point, we are booked up almost to 30,000 people already. So what we're hoping is that if we can get those 28,000, we'll be able to have that as a permanent site. We also have a site now at the Dome that is strictly for, convention center strictly for people over 65. And so they can just go there. They won't have to have the mixed combination of going to the dome and having all kind of people in every category. So we're moving forward. Johnson & Johnson is going to help us. And when we get, as we move forward with other vaccines that get approval, we will have more. And so our hope is, and it's looking that way if we continue to get people vaccinated and help people overcome hesitancy about the vaccine so that they do get vaccinated, that by fall, we would have at least 80% of the people in our area vaccinated.
Awesome. Okay, now I want to open it up to all of our pastors. So any questions that you have on your heart or that you've collected from your memberships or whatever, you can ask them now.
I have a question. Thank you so much for the wonderful information. So that's helped me a lot. But I have been vaccinated, but it seems as if the Pfizer and the Moderna are very different in how they affect people. So, and tell me, doctors, what's happening with that? Because the Pfizer, from what I had, the Pfizer had no side effects, but I know it kind of depends on your underlying conditions or your body. But the Moderna, from what I've heard from people that have had the vaccine, they have definitely had some side effects. And so is that because of the vaccine itself, or is that because of the body?
So that's the great question. All of the vaccines will cause side effects in some people. I would say about 2/3 of people will develop side effects to these vaccines. The Pfizer and Moderna are actually really similar vaccines. Remember, those are both that messenger RNA vaccines. They're made really similarly, and messenger RNA actually triggers quite an inflammatory response. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It means that your body's immune system has turned itself on. And one of the first signs of your body's immune system turning itself on is inflammation. Think about when you get the flu. You know, one of the first things that you notice is you get chills and achiness and fever. And that's actually not the flu doing that. That's your body defending itself against the flu. And so when you get those reactions with a vaccine, it's not a bad thing. It means, again, your body's immune system has turned on and is revving itself up. Now, what kinds of things might people expect? And not everyone will get them. In fact, younger people tend to get them more frequently than older people. And even younger people, not everyone gets the same response. It's usually about 12 to 24 hours of achiness. You might have a low-grade fever. You might feel some chills. You may have a headache. A lot of people are reporting pain at the injection site. I can personally testify to that. I felt like somebody punched me in the arm or took a piece of tissue out of there. It was quite surprising. I never felt that. I've had dozens of vaccines over my lifetime. And yeah, so you can expect it, but it is transient. It is mild. It does just last a day or so. It does respond very well to Tylenol and ibuprofen if you need it. And compared to COVID, it's a world of difference.
Yeah.
The Johnson & Johnson vaccine will also have similar reactions. One nice thing about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is that it's a single dose vaccine, so you'll only have to suffer once. Yeah, everybody's different. All these vaccines are fairly similar in the reactions they cause.
And I can say that what we're seeing in the population that we've been getting down, especially in our people, is that the first dose tends not to be as bad. The second dose tends to have more of the symptoms after the side effects after the second dose. And that's been true with Pfizer. The first group we did Pfizer, second group we did Moderna. And so we've had the same, not many people. Older people tend not to have as strong a reaction from the side effects as younger people. And Dr. Branch referred to the younger people seem to have a stronger reaction. Older people seem not to have as strong, but all of them have something, but we're looking for that. So we're kind of happy when they do, but they don't last long. And some people have none. And so it just depends on how good, I think, how your body's response to the vaccine itself, to your body's immune system, how it responds. As we get older, it's not as strong. It doesn't want to get up and fight as bad, so we don't have quite as many symptoms. But younger people, they want to fight, so there's rise up.
I got a question for Dr. Branch. First of all, thank you for being here and your knowledge. It is very enlightening and helpful, and so I'm grateful for that. What is the difference in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as opposed to the other two, where you only need one shot?
Yeah, so the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, after one shot, they made a certain level of antibodies that we did not feel would be sufficiently protective. And in fact, when we looked at it in clinical trials, how many people, what the rate of protectiveness, what we call the efficacy, was after one shot for Pfizer and Moderna, it's somewhere around 50 to 60%. And that just wasn't. And so when we were doing the earlier clinical trials of the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, we found that about 50 to 60% of people had a good enough immune response after one shot that they might be protected and didn't go on to get sick. But in order to move the needle to better than 50 to 60%, because we were really hoping for 80, 90%, we got there when we gave them the second shot, because those other people who didn't have a good enough antibody response with one, when you boosted them with a second shot, their antibodies level shot up. So that's what happened with Pfizer and Moderna. Now with Johnson & Johnson, after one shot, they had a really good antibody response. And so in the earlier trials, it was felt that maybe since just one shot was good enough to give such a good antibody response, that would be all that's needed. Now, as you may know, the efficacy that's been reported for these vaccines are quite different. The Pfizer and Moderna, they report that 94 to 95% of people after they've gotten 2 doses are protected from getting any sort of symptomatic illness. And that's an amazing response. Whereas with the Johnson & Johnson, the efficacy in the United States was only 72%. So it's a little bit lower. And I think that may be partially explained by the difference between getting one shot and then boosted by a second versus just having one shot alone. So Johnson & Johnson is sort of in the process of reconsidering whether or not they would give people a single boost. But what they found in their clinical trial was that even though the efficacy, meaning the complete prevention of any sort of illness, was 72%, which is lower than high 90s, even the 28% of people that got an infection, it was really just a mild cold. And so if you have a vaccine that for every 100 people you give a single shot to, 72 of them will not get infected at all, and the 28 that do get infected just have a cold, that's actually good enough. It's more than good enough. Because these vaccines, while we would love them to prevent infection completely, they're really meant to prevent severe illness, to prevent hospitalization, and to prevent death. And so if you have a vaccine that does that just fine, even though, you know, a third of the people might still get a mild cold, that's a good enough, that's more than sufficient. That's a really good vaccine.
And so what does herd immunity, what does that play on completely ending the spread of the COVID virus?
So there's herd immunity is a concept that says you introduce a new infection into a community. And a good example of this historically is think about what happened with the Native Americans when Europeans came to, you know, the Western world, right? Native Americans had never seen smallpox. They'd never had other diseases like measles, those sorts of things. And so that was introduced into Native American communities by Europeans. And the virus spread throughout the entire community until every single person got infected. And that's what viruses do when they're introduced into a new community. And so COVID is like that, right? It's a virus that none of us has ever seen. So over time, if we were to let it just continue to spread, every single person will become infected. And in fact, over the next 10 or 20 years, probably all of us will become infected. What is the vaccine meant to do though? The vaccine is meant to slow down the transmission from person to person so that we move past the pandemic and can return to normal life. We don't overwhelm our healthcare system. We don't have thousands of people dying every day. And so the vaccine will protect enough people from getting infected at all. And even though a small percentage of people will still become infected, transmission slows down so much that we move past the pandemic, and now we just have a slow amount of infection over time. The vaccine is also giving you enough defense so that even when you do become infected, and again, we all will, it's not going to make you sick. You might not even know you got infected, or if you do, you'll get just a mild cold. And so that's the goal. That's how we end the pandemic. We're trying to end the pandemic by getting enough people to have at least partial, if not complete immunity, so that transmission slows down to just a trickle. And then we give people enough immunity so that even when they become infected, they never get really sick.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that that threshold is about 80% of the community.
Okay.
So in terms of, as you stated, everyone eventually will get infected. Is this something that we look at where we'll have to continue to get tested? Because again, you'll be around individuals, and of course, you know how we can think in terms of these things. Is it likely that we'll have to continue in that? Like the flu shot, do you get this every year? How can you explain that?
You know, probably not. Something to keep in mind is that this is not the only coronavirus that causes infection in humans. In fact, 4 of them circulate every winter, and it's the common cause of the cold. And so you've had dozens of coronavirus infections in your lifetime. And it's not that it's not that it's a coronavirus that caused the pandemic. It's that it's novel, it's new. And so over time, it'll most likely become like all the other coronaviruses, where people will get colds with it all the time and not even pay attention. To get to that point, though, we need to have enough people in our community that has partial immunity. And with other coronaviruses, you develop that partial immunity by getting sick several times as a child, and then over time, you just have it for the rest of your life. With COVID, there is no partial immunity. So we're giving it to you in the form of a vaccine, and then we might boost you again in a year, and then in a couple of years, that memory partial immunity will be sufficient, we hope, so that it turns what is a deadly virus into a common virus.
Doctor, what makes it so devastating and fatal?
So it's a combination of things. It really has to do with the fact that it's not a virus we've ever seen, our body's ever seen before. And so when we get infected with it, what makes it deadly is your body's immune system is trying to respond to it, but it has never learned how to respond to it. And so it just kind of has this exuberant, out of control, inflammatory response that causes a lot of damage. And so the virus itself, you can get over pretty quickly, but the defense that it's triggered, that's deranged and unlearned, and like a kid trying to ride a bike, who took the training wheels off before they were ready. It's not ready. And so it's trying to adapt, and it's trying to do things, and it's going out of control. And that defense, that inflammatory defense, starts to damage lungs and starts to damage kidneys and livers and hearts, and it causes strokes and it causes blood clots in the lungs, and people end up on ventilators, and that's why they die. The virus itself you can control, but the triggered defense is just not something our body's handling very well.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Two things. One is the 6 o'clock news. They mentioned that there's a vaccine brand hesitancy, that people don't want the Moderna shot because of bad side effects. And so I guess as that goes through the community being heard on the news, that will probably raise some hesitancy in people that maybe didn't have it before. But my question is, I have a penicillin allergy, and that is my hesitancy to getting the shot. And I wanted to know what your opinion is about that, doctor.
Reverend Jackson, do you want to share some of your experience with that, or?
Well, I get severe urticaria with penicillin, life-threatening, and I've had it, different times. I've only had the penicillin shot once, and I was in the hospital for a week near death. So I don't want anything that's going to trigger urticaria like that. And I've been concerned to wait or to hesitate. I really wasn't sure whether to do it now or wait until there's more evidence that it's not harmful or whatever to people on medicine or have had a medical allergy.
Mm-hmm.
We've been interviewing people around vaccine hesitancy, and we've been talking to physicians about that for people that have. And so the recommendation down from CDC is that if a person has had a history of severe allergies to various types of medications, they carry EpiPens, they have frequent responses to a variety of medications, then they should really, give it a second thought whether they want to take this or not. Bottom line, though, is we always say, ask your physician.
Right.
Get your doctor's opinion. So I had a person call me yesterday because she has MS, and she was not certain that she wanted to take MS because she took a flu shot once and she had a bad reaction to it. Her doctor, it was highly recommended to her, because she has MS and her mom has MS in the family, that they try it because her symptoms only lasted for a couple of weeks. So for people that have anaphylactic shock like you do, that may cause death and can cause them to swell up, then, but there hasn't been any indications from the science thus far that people with allergies to penicillin have had any kind of reaction, as far as we know, to the vaccine.
I did ask back in the fall, and she did tell me to wait, but I do have a 86-year-old friend that got the shot, had no reaction. I have a 62-year-old friend that has penicillin allergy. So, the two people that I know have said they've had no reaction. So that was a bit, I just wanted to know what you ladies thought.
Yeah, we have not had, and we've had several people that have allergies to medications specific, like penicillin and Keflex or something, and none of them have had any kind of response.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, the anaphylaxis which has only been reported to the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, is extremely rare, even though you hear about it on the news a lot. It's something like 23 in every 1.1 million people that get the vaccine. So it's like it's a rare thing. And I wouldn't get Pfizer. If you're somebody that has a lot of allergies, I wouldn't get the vaccine in a pharmacy. I would go to your doctor's office. I would go to a hospital, someplace where if you have an allergic reaction, they can treat it very easily and very quickly. So that might be a way to safeguard yourself a little bit. And then the other thing is, there's one specific molecule in the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines that we think is triggering the allergic reactions. And that molecule is not in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So if you have at all any sort of fears about that sort of thing, you can maybe go to a site that's giving the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Well, that's good to know. Okay.
But again, it's very, very rare. And for you in particular with your penicillin allergy, I would have little to no concern, and I would just say get it in your doctor's office. So just in case,
Okay. Thank you.
So can you choose which one? Because I thought you could.
Yeah, we really don't. We don't always know what we're going to get. The state sends us our allotment of vaccine. And so we don't know what we're going to get until they tell us what we're going to get. And so if it's going to be Pfizer, they send us and they will let us know the day before, maybe that it's going to be Pfizer. And then we don't have, or they say, okay, you're going to get Moderna, or you're getting, but we don't know in advance until they decide what they're going to send. And so we really don't have an option to have people ask when we are registering them for this, is it Pfizer or Moderna? Sometimes we don't know until we get there. And so
So
we really
That
don't
turn
have the
people
option.
away.
I'm sorry.
Does that turn people away based upon,
Actually,
you know, our culture, you know how
yeah,
we can be.
we do.
We're so-
I agree. But so far we have had very, very few people turn it down.
That's good.
Very, very few that have said, you know, they may have thought about it, mainly if they turn it down, it's because they've heard something erroneous about it that really isn't true. You know, they said, well, the Moderna is worse on you. Actually, it hasn't been worse on a whole lot of people. You know, a lot of people haven't had a problem at all. And so they said, yeah, but my friend did. So therefore they don't want to do it. But we really don't have a choice. Whatever they send, that's what we give. And we don't have a choice. And most people have not had a problem accepting whatever we've had available.
Yeah.
Actually, you have people now trying to wait for Johnson & Johnson because I get calls all the time saying, is it Johnson & Johnson? Because they only want to get one shot.
Has any come from Johnson & Johnson yet?
Yes, we will be doing Johnson. They will be doing, I understand that what they're going to be sending to the 65 and older may be Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard that
Where will that be?
one site in Rochester that'll have Johnson & Johnson.
We don't know yet. I know it won't be the Hawkeye site, but we don't know when that's coming in. That's the thing about, you know, the vaccine sites and the pop-up sites. They let us know. They called and let us know on Wednesday and say, okay, we're going to send you're going to get this many doses for Saturday. And then we're, you know.
Dr. Jackson, thank you for being here. And I'm really grateful and really appreciate the work that you're doing in bringing these sites to Rochester. Question I wanted to ask you is that I heard you earlier say that Hawkeye would be have a 28-day period of vaccination. Yes. Now, I've been advocating for family members and people in the community, helping them set up their appointments. You just made me nervous because I have set up a couple of appointments for April the 28th at Hawkeye. Tell me, are they going to be there or where do we go? Will they go to an empty parking lot?
No, everybody that gets registered by the date that the site is supposed to close will be serviced. They will get the vaccine. Nobody will be turned away if they're registered. They're not. If they're registered, yes, they will get the vaccine.
Okay, but you said they're only going to be at that site at Hawkeye.
Right. Hawkeye is scheduled to be a temporary site for 28 days. Okay. And so they're booking up through that whole 28 days. And if anybody books a reservation to get a vaccine during that 28 days, they won't take any vaccinations. They won't take any registrations after that time.
All right.
Everybody's getting at the second dose. Well, first of all, they got the first dose that's after the 28 days. Then they got to come back
and do the second dose. And the second dose is always given at the site where you got the first dose.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're taking registration for 1 month, but they will actually be physically at that location for at least
two times. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And what we're hoping is that we will get that full 1,000 doses of 28, and that shows that people really want it and will utilize that site, especially in the city. Mm-hmm. And we're hoping that they will consider leaving that site longer.
Got you. Got you. Okay. Now I don't have to hit the panic button.
And so, and one of the things, let me say, Reverend Cox, it's been awesome that people, one of the things that we've done is utilize the churches to be able to register. We registered mostly all of our people. We've gone around and actually registered them because it can be very difficult and daunting to get on there and register. And if you're not tech savvy, and a lot of our seniors are not,
Right.
and low literate, and so it's been really helpful to have different groups registering. Last week we had people going door to door actually helping people register, and now the libraries in Rochester and there are centers have people there that will help you register. Will go online and register with you, and also 311 and 211.
That's good.
I have another question. I'd like to know, once you have been had the vaccine, how careful do you need to be after? Because, you know, there's still your family members, your grandkids, people around you that said, I'm not getting the vaccine. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, so how
Yeah.
careful do we really need to be?
Right. That's good.
So I think that from what we've learned from the clinical trials, that no one who has gotten any of the 3 vaccines that are currently have emergency use authorization have ended up hospitalized from COVID, and no one who's gotten a vaccine has died from COVID. So I think that once you're vaccinated, you can feel personally assured that you likely have sufficient immunity, that you will not get a severe infection, you will not be hospitalized, and you will not die from COVID. And the freedom that comes with that is, it's unexplainable. If you got vaccinated, you know what I'm talking about. But I was in tears because I didn't realize the amount of, I trust God with my life, but we're living with this huge risk all the time. Every time I step out the door, every time I see a patient, if I go to Target, and I didn't really it was a subconscious thing. I wasn't consciously thinking about how much that risk was sitting and weighing on me every single day until I got vaccinated and it was gone. And I thought, oh, so this is what it feels like to feel a little bit safer. Like God is God and he has my life in his hands, but if you're in a war, you're in a war, even if God has your life in his hands. And so that risk, that unsafety, when it's gone, it's a relief. And so I think you being vaccinated lifts some of that. And I think you can be confident in that. Can you still get infected? It's possible, but we would expect it to be mild. And so you're safe. But if you're still able to be infected, if it's an asymptomatic infection, it means you can still spread it. And it means everybody around you can still spread it. And so we do recommend that even after you're vaccinated, that you continue to be cautious. It's not about yourself now, it's really about protecting the rest of your community. And so we do still tell people to wear masks, keep your gatherings small, social distance when it's appropriate, especially if you're stepping outside your bubble. And so all those things have to remain in place until enough people in our community is in that safe zone as well. But am I seeing my family now? You bet I am. I went home to see my parents, so that was great. And they're vaccinated now too, so it definitely is better.
And I want to say that you said something that I think is really important. Like this is like the pastors, right? And we trust God, we have faith. But in the beginning of this, I remember I was getting anxiety going out. And I've never, not that I know of, I had never had anxiety. So for me to go out and feel like, oh, it's too many people, oh my goodness, I really had to pray. And I'm just going to be honest, because I had never dealt with that in my life that I know of. And then all of a sudden, so I'm so thankful that I have the vaccine, but it really bothers me that people around me, they are saying I'm not getting it. And I'm not understanding why they would not make sure that they are safe and their family is safe.
Okay, before Dr. Jackson responds, because I know she's got a response, and I know she's going to get passionate. Don't beat on your desk when you start talking, okay?
I'm not. Just simple.
All right, go ahead.
We to say that you're not the only one that feels that way. And we still have a lot of vaccine hesitancy. And most of it is really based on things that are not true, just things that people believe, things that they've heard. And a lot of it is on young people that feel that they're infallible and that they can handle it. And because they're asymptomatic, they feel like they don't need to do all of that. And we're being too careful and it's not necessary. And so, and then, on the faith side, we've had some teachings on the faith side that said, you know what? Don't do it. Don't do it. We believe God and that's all we got. God gonna take care of us. We've had that teaching. So people believe that. So they feel like I'm not taking it. I had that at a conversation at a Bible study last night. And so there are a lot of reasons that people are hesitant. And so we've been doing some empathy interviews, asking people, what have you heard and why do you not want to take it? There are some people that will never take it because they've never taken a vaccine in their life and they never will. Those are not the people that we're trying to talk to. You're not going to convince them. But people that are hesitant because of erroneous teaching or understanding or don't have true facts, those are the people that we try to talk to. And, the biggest group of people that have not had hesitancy that we thought might have been seniors. They have been flocking. They have the highest rate of vaccination. They are getting out there and now we're hoping that what's going to happen is that people will see that the seniors are getting it. They're not dying. They're doing well. They're not, that more and more people will now. And we are, I think, seeing a trend that more people will begin to do that. But it's the younger population, actually under the age of like 40 and below, that we're having a problem getting.
I think this is a real space, though, for Christians to lead.
Absolutely.
I think as Christians, like, we are called to be salt and light in the earth.
Right.
I think that this is a space where when God says, love your neighbor as you love yourself, like, if you feel you don't need the vaccine, don't do it for yourself. Do it because God tells you to love your neighbor. And so I think that this is, like, in our community especially, this is an area where we can hold a banner for what, godly love of our community and our world looks like. And I think if young people who are followers of Jesus are doing it, then they can talk to their families and their friends, and that's how we be salt. I mean, that's how we're called to be salt. So yeah.
How do you suggest that we present this over our pulpit without sounding bossy or telling people you better go get a shot? I certainly cannot present it to them the way you just presented it to us. But what I have done is nicely suggested. But sometimes people need a little more than just a
yeah. I've been thinking a lot about this
myself.
Yeah,
I haven't had it. I'm sorry, I haven't had the shot myself, so it's kind of hard to say, yeah, go get the shot now, and I haven't had it.
Right.
Well, you know what? Let me just say this: we don't tell people.
You're muted, Dr. Jackson.
We're not telling people to go. You need to go. We're giving them information that will help them make an informed decision. And one of the ways for the faith community is referencing the fact that we've been praying. We don't have prayer meetings all night, prayer meetings, fasting prayer meetings, revivals and everything, asking God to fix this. We are prayed, asking Lord for an answer, and now the answer has come.
Right.
And you know what? I remind people that God uses people, places, and things. He is God, and He can do the miraculous, slap His fingers, and it's done.
Yeah.
He typically uses people, places, and things. And we say, if you don't believe that, look at the Bible. Look at those people that were not saved, were not His people, the King Cyrus and all that He used for His purpose.
Right.
And so now when they say, well, these doctors ain't saved, listen, God uses whomever, however, then I refer them to the fact that we're created in God. God said He created us in His own image. So what does that mean? We can think, we can reason, we can problem solve, we can create. God used these people to do that, whomever that is. And we're all created with that ability because we all have that God in us.
Right.
Okay? So now to say that this is not God, this is science. No, it's God, because if there were no God, there would be no science.
Right.
And
that's right.
Our faith is not so much in the science. Our faith is in the God of the science.
Amen.
And couch it in that kind of language, and we can show throughout. If people felt the same way when Jesus spit on the mud and put it on somebody's eyes and listen, I'm not taking that because I don't know where that mud come from, and I don't know what you had in your mouth. So therefore, I'm not, don't put no mud on me.
Right.
Okay. To say, no, we trusted. He trusted whatever he did. And so we couch it in that kind of language and show through the scripture. And I think that the scripture can be used to show that God has used various methods.
Yeah, absolutely.
About healing, because medicine treatment comes from doctors, but healing comes from God.
Right. Thank you.
So Pastor Felder, I was going to say that if you want to know the exact way of how to make sure that you present this, just have Reverend Jackson come in and preach, and there you go.
I already thought of that. Absolutely.
So I've heard 3 arguments from people of faith about why they would not get a vaccine. The first is, well, God is sovereign, and if he wants me to not get COVID or not die from COVID, that's he's gonna do. But I always remind people that when Jesus was in the desert being tempted, and Satan said, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down from this cliff and let's see if the angels will lift you up. And Jesus said, it is written, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And so if God provides a way out and you are just going to sit around and wait for his hand, then that's kind of like tempting the Lord.
Yeah.
The other thing that I hear a lot is, science is science, it's unnatural, it's not a bad thing. And I always tell people that science and medicine is the work of God's hands.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to trust the work, you're trusting the hands.
Trust the hands.
Right?
Amen.
The person behind the hands. And I think that's really where a lot of the tension comes. And I think we also have to remind people that we live as brothers and sisters of each other, and as people who are going to be the salt and light, and that the standard that we set in this world is the one that people are going to follow, and it's either going to be one that builds and leads to Christ, or it's going to be one that tears down.
Yes.
So you're going to be a kingdom builder, or you're going to be a kingdom terror. That's really what it comes down to.
I gotta just drop this in, during this whole pandemic, if you look at even some of the churches, the national churches on television, I mean, there were churches, they had no mask. Now, this was in the midst of the pandemic. So those pastors, this is what I looked at. Those pastors were sending signals to their congregation. I wasn't there, so I don't know if they said you don't have to wear a mask, but none of them had masks on. They have full-blown services with no mask. So what does that say? I started looking at it as, as a pastor, we need to direct our people. Of course, we don't say you need to get the shot, but I am going to do as best as I can from what you all have shared with me and what I already knew, that listen, you want to make sure that you are protected and your family's protected. Both my parents came down with COVID, and they're in their 70s. And I thank God that God blessed them, that they made it through. Nobody could visit them. Nobody could come into their house. So my mom started, she didn't have it. My dad had it, then she got it. They were both sick. But I thank God that both of them have had their vaccine. And, so we have to, as Black and Brown community, we got to say, hey, you got to do the best. And like Pastor Felder, I understand, you got some underlying conditions, so you have to really be careful. But guess what? Some people, they don't have no underlying conditions.
You're right.
What you got to do. Do what you got to do so that you could live and not die. There are thousands of pastors that have died.
That's right.
Pastors, men and women of God. So, I was like,
I'm not afraid. Yeah, I'm going to get the shot. I already have an appointment to go over to the Hawkeye area. And I recently had eye surgery, and I couldn't see to make the appointment. But one of my saints called, and they hooked me up. I gave them a picture of my driver's license to get the information. So they got me an appointment. Good. And I'm going by faith. I'm not afraid, because I will not die of a COVID shot. So yes, I'm going to do that. And you know what? When my saints ask me, I tell them, you know what? I have not had it yet. They directly ask, have you had it? And I tell them why. But I tell them that, you know what, I give them the same information, talk to your doctor and use wisdom and go, you know? And so I even have a nurse practitioner that's not, and I'm thinking, you know, okay, but you know, it's their decision, but I am trying to promote nicely. Yes, go, and most of them, you know, many of them have already gotten with an appointment.
Yeah.
This disproportionately affects people of color. It has disproportionately affected Black and brown people.
Yeah. I know several
we're
people
the ones that have died. We have disproportionately died with COVID because of racism, underlying health conditions, and that's another story. But we have disproportionately died from it and been affected by it. And so it's important that we as leaders of our folk, that we encourage them to step on out on faith and do what they need to do.
Absolutely, I agree.
We're just about out of time. We'll take one more question, and then I want to go to Dr. Phyllis Jackson for any last words, and then we'll go to Dr. Blanche. All right, so one more question.
Yeah, I just wanted, Dr. Branch, why does it attack people of color more than any other race?
I think it has disproportionately affected people of color and attacked us more because of decades and centuries of historic disadvantages that our community has faced, which has resulted in us being so-called frontline workers in jobs where we have to show up every day. We don't have the luxury of working at a computer from home because we don't have the access to healthcare that our white neighbors and counterparts do. And therefore, we don't engage in preventative medicine. We don't control our diabetes. Our hypertension isn't controlled. We have a lot of heart disease. We have a lot of obesity in our communities. And even when we get sick, we don't know who to turn to or where to go get tested or who's going to treat us or how are we going to pay for it. And I think that we tend to live in multi-generational families. I grew up in a home of 13. If one person gets it, the whole household gets it. And I think that we don't trust what we're hearing and seeing from predominantly white doctors and scientists on TV. And so it's a perfect storm for our community. I think, you know, Dr. King said that healthcare injustice is one of the most inhumane. And he's right, because it leads to death. And we're just seeing COVID is just shining a spotlight on something that's always been there. We've always been dying more from disease than our white counterparts. COVID's just making that super obvious.
Yeah. All right, now I'm going to go back to Reverend Jackson for any final words before we finish up.
No, thank you so much for everyone. I just so enjoyed it and just want to encourage you to toe the line and continue on doing what you're doing and encouraging people to get vaccinated. Encourage them and ask them to look for facts. And if you have groups of people that you would like someone to talk to about their hesitancy, about why they're afraid, about their concerns, please contact me and we will make sure that we have some Black and brown people that will come out and talk to them, give them some facts that will talk to them and try to help alleviate those fears and mitigate those factors that are keeping them. So we're still out here doing that work and we appreciate all the work that all of you are doing around this COVID.
Reverend Phyllis Jackson, how can we reach you?
I will put my, Reverend Cooper, shall I put it in the chat or shall I just,
if you could put it in the chat for us on the call today, but when we're done, I'll put it on the end of this.
Okay. All right, I'll put it in my email in the chat.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Dr. Branch, any final words?
Yeah, I just like to reiterate, as people of faith and the community faith, we know that disease and sickness will always be with us until there's a new heaven and a new earth. But God's in the business of redemption. And I do think that medicine is one of the ways that he redeems what sin brings, which is sickness and death.
Yes.
And so I'm really thankful personally to be able to partner with God in his perfect redemptive plan in medicine and in vaccines and in helping people to live their best and healthiest lives. And I hope that anybody out there who's listening to this that has some concerns, that, you know, don't be afraid to do the hard work of finding out information and of wrestling with your beliefs and your faith and your concerns until you get to the answer that you need to get to. And if it's a no at that point, if that's what God puts on your heart, then, you know, so be it. But don't be afraid to do the hard work to find the right answer. That's what I think.
Amen.
All right, well, praise God, and thank you so much, Reverend Jackson, for being on this call, and thank you so much, Dr. Blanche, for both of you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and information. Thank you so very, very, very much. I also want to thank all of the pastors from the Faith Leaders Roundtable, as well as all of the other pastors. Pastor Harris, thank you so much. You always come through, and Pastor Anderson and Pastor Meeks and Reverend Cox, thank you, and Pastor Felder, thank you so much for being a part of this. I think that we're mission accomplished. We gathered some information that we didn't have so that we can inform our community about what's really going on, and they would have the latest information. So thank you so very, very much to all of you for being a part of this. Y'all have a great evening. God bless you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Amen. Be
Thank
blessed.
you, Russ.
Thank
I'm
you,
doing my
doctors.
first
Thank
shot
you.
on the 13th.
Okay, hold on.